guys, welcome back to another video. So today, my little Easter doll that I've made. It's not quite an art doll, it's more of a custom action figure, and I've been wanting to make it for a long time. So I made myself a little Frank the Rabbit from Donnie Darko. So here's a little look, if it'll focus. So the head is sculpted out of polymer clay. The body is obviously faux fur that I sewed up. The shoes have been sculpted out of epoxy sculpt and painted. I even did like little laces on them. I don't know if the camera's going to pick it up. Probably not. Yeah, so I did little laces on them and everything. So a little turn around. And yeah, I sewed all the body up. So this is on a customized action figure body. So I don't know if you can quite see, but yeah, it's a sort of customizable action figure body, so you can move his head around and everything. It's quite articulated, and I think it's 1/6 scale or something, but yeah, I sculpted it out of polymer clay, painted it up, and sewed it all together with this is my second choice of the fur, but yeah, I think it works quite well. I did use Mongolian faux fur for it, and yeah, so this is my little Easter doll. So I'm glad I waited to make him when I did, because he looks pretty cool. I think it's pretty close to the actual movie prop. So yeah, if you want to know how I made him, and then keep watching. Okay, so I'm starting out with, it's a little bit of a different technique for this one, because I'm using a customizable action figure. I'm just going to be sculpting the head to fit directly onto the action figure's neck. So I'm starting off pretty much the same way with just a really small aluminium foil core, and that just gives it some strength and body to stick to, and obviously it's not so thick, the polymer clay is not so thick, so I'm covering it in a really small layer of polymer clay. Now the polymer clay that I'm using is Sculpting Original, and it's a little bit of a softer clay which I like to work with, but if you like something harder you can use something like Super Sculpting or Sculpting Firm, or even Cos clays as well. They come in different types of firmness. So I actually found this head quite tricky to sculpt. The first attempt that I did a different sort of technique, and it wasn't really turning out how I wanted it to turn out. So I scrapped it, pulled it all off, and started again with a smaller armature in the middle. That's the aluminium foil, and I think it was just a little bit too thick the first time. So I done a smaller armature for this one, which worked well. The second attempt was much better. It took a couple of hours to sculpt though. It was a little tricky to get all the angles. The reference photos were quite hard to get a side profile. They're all really grainy and dark, so it was a little bit difficult. I had to sort of just make it up. Obviously there's a lot of cosplay ones and stuff, but they're not 100% accurate. So yeah, I found some really good reference images from a display of the costume itself. There was a lot of fan photos on different angles, so that worked quite well. So I'm basically just starting off with kind of the top head piece, and then moving on to the lower jaw. So I wanted to basically map out the rough shape to begin with, which is what I normally do, because this one is like a kind of a skull bunny, but not really. It was not really something I've ever sculpted before, so I found it a little bit tricky, but it was definitely great to challenge myself sculpting this. So I started off trying to get those cheekbones in place to begin with, and just where the mouth, the top of the mouth I should say, ends and has that scoop, and where the nose is going to sit. So this part was kind of okay, easier. I was kind of doubting myself a little bit, not sure if I can sculpt this, but I persisted, and it just takes time. This one just took a little bit of time because I hadn't sculpted anything like this before. Alright, and so for the eyes, I'm just using some clay for the eyes. I don't need them to be shiny or really smooth or anything, because the head is quite textured, so it's not smooth. So I like texture. Smoothness I don't much like, but I just went for some clay ice for this one, which I'm gonna paint anyway, just a really light coat, but that's towards the end of the video. So I placed in where I want the eyes to be, and I shaped them into the rough shape, just being careful that I don't like dint them or anything, but you know, it can be fixed. So then I can start building up on the nose sort of ridge, I guess. It's not too pronounced, so I'm just doing a little bit of clay and blending it in with my silicone tool. You can see I've added the lower jaw portion as well. The lower jaw was probably the most tricky because it is quite thin and I needed some space to add the teeth, so I have to sort of envision where the teeth were going to sit, and it is quite angular as well, as opposed to the rest of the head, which is quite smooth. So I had to use my little slicer tool that I have. It's a Sculpting brand slicer tool, and just sort of angle that jawline a little bit. Okay, and then I can start building the bone structure around the eyes. So again, we're rolling out a piece of wormy clay and just placing it over that eye. Just being careful not to blend that polymer clay in too much. It's not the same as using a cabochon, so it's a little bit more fragile. But I want to get that cheekbone blended and nice and pronounced. And then I can start building up that brow line as well. Same deal, rolling out a thicker piece of snake this time. And the brow is quite pronounced. And I had a little play around to make sure I'm getting the sort of angry-ish look to it. Sinister look, I should say. Not so angry. Sinister sort of look to it. Making sure I'm looking at it at all angles, because obviously in the movie you can see different angles have like a different expression. So I had a look, you know, turn the sculpture around, making sure I'm getting that particular look that Frank has. Okay, so in the movie, the costume has a little bit of a definition in the middle of the head. It's kind of like a layering, a bone layering, I guess. I'll try and insert an image and show you what I'm sculpting. That's a good idea. So I've just placed 2 bits of clay in a rough shape, and then I'm going to sort of blend it out with my silicone tool, making sure I'm getting those lines. They're actually quite angular lines, but they're kind of smooth at the same time. So yeah, I think the silicone tool was a perfect tool to get in all those crevices and smooth it out. Like the edges need to be smooth a little bit, but it needs to have a ridge on it. Alrighty, next up are the ears. The ears I was a little apprehensive about because they're really textured, I should say, and they're really messy looking, if that makes sense. So I knew I wasn't going to get them exactly the same as what's in the movie, but I can get it really close. So for the ears, they do need an armature in them to steady up that clay, because the polymer clay is just going to fall over if it doesn't have a support in it. So I've got a little piece of clay and a couple of pieces of armature. The armature I'm using is like a little florist wire. So it's quite thin, but it's sturdy enough that it's going to support the ears. And basically what I'm doing is one ear is a little bit floppy, the other ear is quite straight. So I've rolled out 2 equal parts of clay for the ears. I've done a really rough inner ear pattern with my silicone tool. And then what I'm going to do is insert the armature into it and sort of do more texturing once that's inserted. It's always a little bit tricky working this way because a lot of the time the end of the armature pokes out sometimes, so it's a little bit of work to get this just right, and you want to have enough of that armature sticking out of the ear to put in the main bit of the head so it doesn't sort of fall out and topple over. So it's a little bit of a trickier thing to do. Alright, so we started off with the straight ear. So you can see there's quite a bit of armature sticking at the bottom. I will trim that, but I will leave a bit of length on it to get inside the head. And basically the ears sort of reminded me of paper mache. So that's sort of what I thought of as I was sculpting this. And yeah, just sort of trying to get those little angular bits together and just right. The curved ear was a little bit more tricky. I sort of had a little bit of trouble with that end poking out, but just spent a bit of time making sure I'm getting the clay to sit perfectly, and it worked out fine. Once I put it on the head, it was fine, and I kind of continue my sculpting. Alright, so I'm just testing out how much length I want coming out. So I'm just trimming some excess off, and then I can start sculpting it into the head or blending it into the head. So it's just a little bit, but you do need some to put inside the head. So I'm making sure that I'm getting the placement right as well, and then I'll start adding a little bit more clay to the bottom of that because it's a little bit too thin. So you can always add clay and it sort of cements it into the rest of the head. I want to get that angling right though, so I look at my reference images from a couple of different angles that I've found, and just pushing that ear forward a little bit, and then I can blend it in. Alright, so this curved one's a little bit different. I just have to keep an eye on that edge of the armature that's going to possibly poke out the top. Hopefully not. But yeah, the curved one seems to be alright. It looks fine, and just getting the placement right. Bending it a little bit to make sure I've got enough of a curve. I didn't think there was curly enough. And then, yes, blending it into the rest of the head and adding a little bit of clay to the bottom. Right, so I need to, when you look at the side of the head, there's a little bit of a ridge as well. So I need to sort of blend that in and make sure I've got those little angles right, because I need to bulk up the end of that ear a little bit, and the edge of the ear is a little bit flared. So I've added a little bit of clay to just flare that out and blend it into the side of the head ridge. Right, so moving on to the teeth. So that's the trickiest part. Sometimes you can bake the clay a little bit and then do the teeth, but I did this all in one hit. I just baked it once. It was fine. It's only a small piece. So for the teeth, I'm doing something a little different and using translucent Sculpey for the teeth. In the movies, the costume looks like they're just painted white with a little bit of staining on them, but I just wanted to make it a little bit more realistic, so this is my little bit of a flair to it. It's not too drastically different, but yeah, I wanted to use some translucent Sculpey for this one. So what I did with the mouth, because the inside of the mouth is quite dark, so it's black basically. So before I added the teeth, I knew I could get in there with a paintbrush nicely. So before I added the teeth, I added a little bit of black clay to the inside of the mouth, and that just makes it easier for me to finish this sculpt off, and it's a lot cleaner. So I added that in before I did anything else and marked out where I wanted the teeth to be. So I can't remember, there was like 6 teeth on one side and 5 on the other or something like that, or 5 or 4, something like that. So there's an odd amount of teeth from the each side. So I marked out where I want the teeth to sit, some little grooves where the teeth are going to sit, and each tooth has a little bit of different detailing on it, so I didn't go too overboard with it. Just a little bit of detail can go a long way in small sculptures. So I added teeth one by one. They are different sizes as well, so I just pulled out a tiny bit of clay, rolled it up in my hand, and then placed it on and finished off the sculpting with my needle tool, trying to get those little individual teeth details. I'm also making sure that the teeth are sitting in the right direction, same as the movie prop. So again, looking at it from all angles and pulling the teeth out or in if I want them to sit a bit further out. So, you know, there's a pretty iconic looking look to Frank from the movie. So you have to look at your sculpture from all different angles, upside down, back to front, round and round, everywhere. Okay, so I'm just finishing off the final little detailing pieces on Frank. So little indentations, little details, any cracks or anything like that. The sculpture, like I said, is very textured, so it's not really that smooth, which I like. So I didn't go and smooth out the face too much, just obviously any little fingerprints or something that I found. And there's a little bit of texturing sort of under the cheekbone and on the lower jaw bit, so add a little bit of texture with my needle tool, and then once I'm happy with that, I can bake it in the oven. Wish me luck with those ears. Alright, so once I baked it in the oven, I can start attaching it to the body. So these action figure bodies come with they're actually really diverse. They come with a lot of different attachments that you can do. So it has two different types of necks. One's really short and one's really long. So I still wanted the posability of the long neck. So I switched out the necks and attached Frank's head to it. I sculpted a faceplate and then attached the head with some epoxy sculpt around that neck attachment. And because that neck attachment is quite long, it has a ball and socket on the top and the bottom, so it still retains that posability, so you can move his head side to side, all that sort of stuff, up and down, and then let that dry overnight to really solidify it in place. I'm not going to be too concerned about the back of the head because it is covered in faux fur anyway, so I can move on to the painting. So for the painting, obviously the prop has kind of a pewter color to the face, so when you're working with different metallic type paints, it's always best to have an undercoat to really bring out that metallic color. So a lot of the time you use black, and that really brings out that metallic color. So I'm going to be painting the head entirely black. That's why I did the inside of the mouth black. So I'm going to paint it entirely black, starting around the eyes, obviously being careful not to get it on that clay. The eyes are white, but they have a little bit of a grey wash over them, but I'll do that last. It's no big deal. So I'm using just some water-based acrylic paint to paint the entire head, let that dry, and then I can go in with that pewter colour. Okay, sorry for the super messy desk. I was working on a couple of different things here I also was doing a live. So I had a couple of things going, the demo guys, the chameleon, and lots of other stuff. So anyway, up to the pewter part. So I'm using some pewter coloured paint by Jacquard. I think it's Lumiere paints by Jacquard, and they're really great metallic paints. The pigment's really nice on them. And ordinarily, if you paint over white, it doesn't really it doesn't come out that pigmented and that metallic, so hence the reason why I painted it black. So I'm just going to go in and paint the whole surface area, all of the black area, in that pewter colour, and it starts to bring out the detail and starts to really look like Frank. So, and I only just needed one coat of this pewter colour. Okay, so for the shoes, I was in two minds about how I was going to do the shoes. Apparently they were Adidas shoes, so I did a bit of Googling to make sure I could find some reference images on what shoes they were. So apparently they were Adidas shoes, so we sculpted some Adidas shoes. I was going to do material, but I sort of decided against doing it that way and just flat out sculpting the shoe. And because the armature is plastic, I couldn't use polymer clay because it would melt in the oven and just yucky. So I went for epoxy sculpt. So epoxy sculpt is a two-part epoxy that you mix together and you can sculpt things with. You can smooth it out with water. It's really great. I've got a video on all about epoxy sculpt if you check out my Materials 101 playlist. And basically I just sculpted not the whole shoe, most of the shoe, not the top part, because you're not going to see it anyway. You literally see the toe and that's it, the toe part of the shoe. So I probably went overboard with the detail on the shoes, but at least I got, you know, the Adidas stuff and everything. And then I wanted to add a little bit of a realistic material touch to it, so I added some different, some realistic shoelaces with some thick string. So it turned out really great. So epoxy sculpt, you've really only got about, depending on weather, half an hour to an hour to work with it, and then it starts to set and go hard. You usually leave it overnight to go hard. So I had a time limit to work with this particular material, so I did one at a time to get it all done. And basically just sculpted a shoe, really. There's not much more to it. I used my little spoon tool to create the different parts of the leather, where the leather attaches, and used my needle tool to create little holes and stuff for where I want the shoelaces to go. Alrighty, so once they're dry, I can start painting it all up. So you can see all the details that I've sculpted. It's going to be painting it flat white to begin with, and then sort of dirtying it up a little bit and painting the Adidas stripes in a black color, like a bluey black. And then once that's dry, dirty them up a little bit and add the shoelaces. Alright, so same deal with basically what I do for my art dolls. I start off with the torso piece, pin it all together, trim off the excess. As this suit is a little bit baggy, so I'm not pulling it skin tight this time. It needs to be a little bit baggy, so I've got a little bit of leeway with it, and just cut off the excess and sew it up with lattice stitch. This is the second faux fur that was my second choice of faux fur, not the one that I was going to use. The other one was too green, and then I dyed it and it turned purple, so it didn't work that well. This is my second choice faux fur. Alright, so I use a lattice stitch to sew up the body, and then use a good quality thread as well. So I usually use Gutermann thread. I want the head, the neck part to sort of sit under the neck area. So I'm trimming a little bit off at this point. And then I'm going to sew it a little bit tighter than the rest of the head, just so it sits under that jawline. And then I'm going to glue that top part of the head to the back, and I'll finish it off with some faux fur furring over the top of that seam line just to hide it a little bit. Then I can move on to the arm pieces. So same deal as what I do with my art dolls, just cut off a rough shape of the sleeve and sew it on with a lattice stitch. I want the sleeve bit to sit a little bit puffy, so it's a little bit bigger. It's not skin tight at all, and I'm going to sew it quite tight around the hand area, and that is so it sort of sits like a puffy sleeve. And same process with the legs as well. The legs are quite baggy, so cutting out a bigger piece, not skin tight piece, a bigger piece, and sewing it all together. I want the bottom of the pant legs to sit just sort of draping over the shoe with a little bit of that toe showing, like I said before. I think there's only one scene in the movie that you can see his shoes, and it's, I think, the part where he's standing on the road. Where Frank is standing on the road, you can see his shoes there. So yeah, sewing it up with the lattice stitch and some of that thread, good quality thread, and then I'm going to give this piece an all over trim, because obviously the grey part of the fabric is quite short, so it needs to be short, so I give it a trim with my pet shaper. And once I've given it an all over trim, I'm just making sure all of the sections are sitting right before I add the belly piece. So The belly piece is a white piece of faux fur that is quite long, so it's a lot longer than the rest of it. So I've got some fur called Mongolian faux fur. This is what I've used through the grey part as well, but I'm going to leave this long. It looks really, really similar to what was on the chest in the movie costume. So I'm just going to sew that on over the top of the grey. For the hand piece, I was in a little bit of two minds about doing it, but I ended up putting a little bit of epoxy sculpt over the inside of the hand, painting it black, and adding some faux fur over the top of the hands. It just looks like a glove. So yeah, I wasn't quite sure how I was going to do this piece, but because you can't see his hands, he has gloves on, so I needed to recreate the gloves somehow. So I went for that particular method. So Frank is part of my personal collection. I just made it for my own benefit. But yeah, I hope you liked watching how I made Frank. He's a really cool designed character, so I've always wanted to make him. I've been wanting to make it for years, and I've never gotten around to it, so now's the perfect time. I'm glad I waited to do it now because I think he turned out really cool. So he is a smaller piece, but yeah. Anyway, you can find my dolls in my shop. Payment plans are welcome. Just shoot me a message and I can tell you how they work. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram and TikTok. I do a lot of lives these days on here and TikTok as well, so check me out there. And yeah, I hope you don't forget to like, subscribe, all that stuff. It helps my channel grow, and I'll catch you in the next one. If you have any requests for another doll, let me know. Bye.